Hi, everyone. My name's Morgan, and I'm the host of Community Therapy. And I'm joined today with two incredible community builders who specify or specialize, rather, in operations within community world. And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves. But this episode today, we're going to be digging in operations from if you're in the early stages of community building, all the way up to leading a department that specializes in operations. So, without further ado, we'll dive into the episode. Okay, so that's a little intro. And then, Tiffany, can you kick us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany Oda. I'm based in San Francisco and have been in the community world since about 2017, most notably working on the Salesforce Trailblazer community team focusing on operations. And now I am the head of global community program membership at Asana. So, working to build out all of our program memberships with a strong focus on community operations as well.
And hello, my name is Ece. I'm based in Manchester, UK, and I'm in the community world since 2020, but I have a corporate event background before that. And that's why I guess I'm mainly involved in communities who are offering community events or recurrent events. Um, I work as an independent consultant of a community consultant, community strategist, but also for the last 2 years, I'm working with Millie on building the Generalist World community. And um, I guess today I'll be mostly talking about operations and the processes of small teams and startup communities.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to have you both join us today. So, thank you so much for your introductions and for being on season two. I guess just to get back to basics to make sure anyone who's listening and tuning in, can you both describe what community operations is and maybe more importantly, what it isn't in your mind as well? So, what is community operations? Why is it important to a team? And then maybe that what it isn't as well.
For sure. I can get started on that one. So for me, I think community operations is all of the things behind the scenes that it takes to run a community successfully. And I think, that can be part of processes in terms of automation, looking to streamline, both front of the house and back of the house processes. I think that's a lot of program management and supporting community programs and initiatives. I think that's managing the tech stack, all of the platforms and tools that it takes to run a community. And then also just like ad hoc things like documentation. There's a lot of data and reporting and analytics that are also included in operations, and really just making sure that the gears are churning smoothly. And both the community team and the community members have the resources that they need to be successful in whatever their endeavors are. I think it's really important because, at least in my experience, especially with myself, I know that I'm not good at engagement very much. I can do it, but that's not really my forte, and that's not really where I find a lot of joy in terms of coming up with content and writing comms and all those types of things. And that's what I feel like community managers are really really good at. I really like to kind of straddle both sides of the house. I love to interact with our community members and get to know them, but at the same time, I love being behind the scenes, just making sure all the puzzle pieces are working together. So I think that is kind of a definition of what community operations is, and maybe even isn't, in terms of you're not really the engagement, you're not doing the moderation, you're kind of setting those rules to set that up.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that.
When Tiffany was explaining that, I was imagining some kind of a restaurant theme or a house dinner party theme.
Yeah.
Um, I might try to go on that, but I feel like I might also fail explaining that as well. But what I can start with actually
Yeah.
is I think in terms of what it isn't or how I evolved into getting interested in community operations,
Yeah.
because I started as a community and events manager in a small startup. So we were only three, four team members. And I was doing everything from customer support to hosting events to talking to partnerships, talking to sponsors, doing some ad hoc website updates, etc. So when you're working in a small team, sometimes it's a little bit blurry what is the operations, what is the community management. But um, what I what I think is when you're the community manager, the facilitator, you take care of the members, and your biggest problem is their problems, or your biggest aim is to make them feel safe and secure and then comfortable within the community. But that doesn't mean always that relates to the business operations or business goals. So I think what differentiates from community operations from the management or
Yeah.
engagement is that you're also becoming a bridge between um, the business operations, and then streamlining the marketing efforts, sales efforts. If it's a product, maybe product building, or if it's a service-based business, maybe the sales or onboarding parts. So you're not only making sure that everyone is comfortable, but also making sure that everyone in the team also comfortable, and everything is running smoothly. So
Oh,
I think
beautiful.
that's the biggest difference.
And I really liked your restaurant analogy. Both of you are speaking in the same way with having front of house, back of house, and then the visualization of like it being a dinner party or a restaurant really cemented that in my mind. And kind of jumping off of the point you just shared, I'm wondering what projects have you worked on in the past that maybe solidified your love for operations or even currently that you're working on? What type of initiatives do you find yourself gravitating towards because you are in operations, or that you find yourself being really excited about working on the operations side? I know we touched a little bit on engagement being something that's not operations. So what does a project look like when you're in operations?
Um, I guess because also I'm coming from an event background, my favorite like ops processes are event processes.
Yeah.
I do love creating a recurrent event calendar for a community because um, I think it like when you create that kind of recurrent strategies or SOPs or operational documentations, then it makes it easier for the team, or you if you need to recruit someone new, maybe a junior team member, or you need to delegate it to someone else.
Mhm.
Um, or if you want to recruit someone within the community, maybe sometimes members jump in and help you out with leading some events. So these are my favorite parts, and this is actually how I found myself into um, getting into the operations part, because I've realized again with the communities that I was involved in, we're doing weekly networking events or workshops for members, or some content pieces, marketing content pieces that we're highlighting our members, or maybe community newsletters, and they actually you don't have to start from scratch every time you're doing something like this. So there are many things that you can duplicate or copy paste the process. Let's say
Yeah.
you're running a recurrent event, like a weekly networking event. So you don't have to rewrite the event description every time, like very basic example, but it is actually a part of the SOP that you would create. So when you're doing it yourself, it's easier. And then when you need to delegate it to someone else, again, it's easier to do.
Yeah.
Um, and then it makes it faster as well, so that you actually increase your capacity a little bit when you're creating these repeatable like processes, so that
Absolutely.
you can get more on your hands from the members, or you can help more
It
within
kind
the
of builds
community.
a structure, it sounds like. It's building the structure of the community, and so, like, very foundational of, like, you're not having to reinvent the wheel
Yeah.
every time. I think oftentimes we'll hear from community managers that, they have so much on their plate, and it sounds like you're using SOPs in a way to build that structure and routine in a way that makes sense to others too on your team. And Tiffany, I think that sort of speaks to a little bit to your point too. Do you want to jump in with projects that you've worked on in the past or are currently working on?
Sure. So I think, from my perspective, working on larger community teams for larger organizations, two kind of big projects that jump to mind are number one, platform migrations and even implementation. So, for example, when I was working at Venafi, we did a migration of our community from Slack to Insided, which is now owned by Gainsight, and really working on not only the tech processes of moving everything to from one platform to another, but coordinating across the team, working with our community managers on a comms plan, working with internal stakeholders on education and enablement of why we're doing these changes, and then really setting everything up for success, finding success metrics, being able to track it, and just managing that program end to end. At Salesforce, when I started, we also worked on migrating our user group event management platform
Yeah.
from Splash and Eventbrite to Bevy. And so again, bringing all that together, making sure no data is lost, making sure we have all the historical information that we need, and just kind of managing all of that end to end. And then I would say a second big project is just, this is kind of ongoing, the automations. So when you have a process that's manual and repetitive and kind of monotonous, and taking up time from a community team member's job, that could be optimized, how to streamline that. So for example, going through community group leader applications and how to automate that, or reimbursement requests, and really making sure that we're looking into ways to optimize so that everyone's time is being better spent.
Oh, lovely. Oh, wow. So operations, it really does run the whole gambit. So you have everything from your day-to-day rituals, and I guess the question that jumps to my mind is when you're automating or when you're building in that into the timeline that you're going to be migrating platforms, or you're just running events on a weekly basis, what type of rituals do you both gravitate towards to make this as I guess transparent to your team and to your community members? So what type of rituals are you finding yourself gravitating towards in operations?
One of the questions asked to me a couple of weeks ago was what would be the first tip to a newly started community manager. And I was thinking of what I struggled the most, and it was the documentation part. So
Mm,
I think one of the biggest rituals is that whenever you're starting something new, even though it's in the experimental stage, um, try to document it as much as possible,
mhm.
so that when you need to report back to your founders or to your supervisors, then it would be easier. The documentation can be anything between just jotting down your reflections and notes to some of the numbers, that what worked, what didn't work. Like, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be so detailed. Um, but also in terms of rituals, I think community is a very I think community in general, the team and the members are very open to having rituals, because sometimes it feels like boring when we talk about these recurrent things, SOPs, operational things. But um, when you build rituals in the culture, then members know what to expect from the team as
Yeah.
well. So it might make it easier for them to engage and then feel comfortable. And again, with the team, you can track, or you can maybe hand over easily, or you can fill in each other's positions easily, especially if you're working with tight capacity. So yeah, we love rituals.
Absolutely. Tiffany, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of rituals, or I guess maybe just like the routine that a community operations person goes through, I think there's a balance between what I call RTD, or like running the business activities. So
Mm,
on a regular basis, I'm reviewing reports, I'm looking for trends, I'm looking for maybe bottlenecks in people's processes that I can help optimize, things that you're checking on a regular basis. And then there's a certain percentage of time and routine where I'm looking to improve certain things, or there's like an event coming up where there's extra work time that's time locked and needs to be done within a certain time, or a new program that's launching or something like that. And so being able to balance the general run the business items, as well as the new things that are coming up that you have to do in a timely manner. And then of course, I think also a routine that is ever going is that internal education as well. And that often falls on kind of like a head of community role, but a lot of the time that's actually also operations, is meeting with
Yeah.
the stakeholders across the company, making sure that like, the policies and guidelines is up to date with the legal team, or working with finance on budgeting. So I think there's a lot to that in terms of also making sure that your cross-functional stakeholders are aligned with you and your roadmap,
Yeah.
and the community initiatives that are going on. And then also sharing visibility into kind of like the data as well, making sure that all your stakeholders have access to metrics that are important for them,
Yeah.
maybe like shared, goals and aligned KPIs that you're working on together, and just making sure that, everything's running smoothly.
Absolutely. And also, I'm a sucker for a good dashboard when it comes to being able to communicate how a community is doing quickly to stakeholders. But I'm wondering from the operations perspective, how do you identify and prioritize the community needs when you're interacting with stakeholders? And that can also run the gambit too when we're talking about the roadmap as well. So, let's kind of break it down into two parts. So, the first being, how do you identify and prioritize community needs when it comes to operations? And then maybe let's zoom out after that and look at roadmap. So, Tiffany, would you mind kicking us off with how to identify and prioritize needs?
I think in terms of identifying needs, a lot of them will actually come to you. So I think you'll get, community team members letting you know when they have a program starting and they need some operational support, or you'll see something break and you just need to jump in and fix it. Like if a automation stops working, or, someone needs help with something, I think that will be highlighted to you. But I also think just looking at the reports, like I mentioned earlier, on a regular basis, you're going to be able to start seeing trends. You're going to start being able to see bottlenecks and where you can jump in and help. I think a lot of the needs are also based off of the things that are going on in the community. So if you have an event coming up, you obviously know that you need to be working on that. Or if you're working on a platform and you know that they have a big new feature coming out that you're going to be working on implementing, that's something that you can allocate time to as well. And I do think in terms of kind of prioritizing, like community operations, like we've mentioned, there's that front of the house and the back of the house. So in my opinion, I think that things that are taking place in the front of the house are always going to take precedent over things in the back of the house, because at the end of the day, we're doing everything for the community members. And so anything that's front facing that they will be interacting with or going through that process, I think that's really important. And then being able to focus on everything to support the back end, um, although is equally important, I think does take a back seat, because we, at the end of the day, care about the member experience the most. And then prioritizing, I think, really looking at like what's urgent, what will not work if it doesn't get fixed, what are the biggest visibility items. I think those are kind of the most important. And then again, looking into those like smaller improvement areas or smaller fine tunings, or even updating internal documentation. I think that's really important. But at the same time, if you're working on a front end bug, I think that's way more important than updating the documentation, which you can always do, next week. It's not going to hurt anybody.
Absolutely. And then, Edja, what do you think when it
Um,
comes to identifying and prioritizing?
I think it's all about, it's a capacity management thing. Like as if it's a supply chain manufacturer, like a supply chain in a manufacturing
Yeah.
factory, or like because you need to manage the capacity of your team. Especially, I guess, because I came from, again, working with really small teams. And as Tiffany said, like it is just a new idea emerges or a new need emerges every day. This is unavoidable. So maybe one thing is to prioritize as little as possible so that you have a buffer time for the ad hoc and urgent needs in the operations. And again, having enough buffer time for time bonded activities, like a campaign is coming or a new launch is coming, or maybe you're opening the cohorts again for your membership, or you're organizing like a big conference. So it's important that the shiny, exciting ideas shouldn't take over your day-to-day operations and tasks. Otherwise, something might break, members might be unsatisfied of saying that, what's going on? We're not getting the community newsletter for a while. What's going on? And you'd be like, oh, we're actually working on a big conference. So you should avoid having that kind of an issue, basically, in
Yeah.
very, in very basic examples.
Ah, beautiful. And Tiffany, was it RTB, Run the Business, was the acronym that you used? That
Yep.
really resonates with me in both of your descriptions, whether you're on a small team or on a large team. It's that prioritization of like, okay, what's going to run the community, and then what is going to, kind of that never ending list that can happen internally, and kind of taking that step back, which, speaking of, is the community roadmap, which can be a whole can of worms. And I know we could do a whole episode on just a community roadmap. But in the operational perspective, where do you see operations supporting, identifying community roadmap initiatives? How have you engaged with community roadmap? Would just love to hear how you are seeing community roadmap in your day to day, both run the business and at large. And then Tiffany, if you want to kick us off.
Okay, sounds great. So I think actually community road mapping is a huge part of a role or responsibility that a community operations person has. First of all, I think number one, and maybe even taking a further step back for any community team, meeting as a team at the beginning of a year or a quarter and really going over, what events are taking place, and this could be community run event or it could be a company run event. So like if you have a big conference coming up and you're partnering with marketing and customer success or other product teams, for example, or any just general cross-functional initiative, whether that's like an idea cleanup and the idea is part of the community, or you're working on with the product team on a new feature launch and you want to be able to provide content for your community, being able to kind of look at that as a big picture and see when are these initiatives taking place that is going to take team member bandwidth, because then you know that so and so person is working on this initiative. They're not going to have time to work on other things that are coming up in the community. And particularly for organizations where community is kind of front and center, you're often fighting for time or fighting off other teams who want to engage with the community in different ways. And so being able to really say like, hey, the community is actually going to be pretty busy doing this initiative, but we can do this a month out, or our team doesn't have bandwidth to do this right now, but we can do this, later this week, or working on prioritizing, I think is something that a community roadmap really helps protect our time and our bandwidth, which is so important in this industry. And then I do think that from an operational perspective, there are things that will come up, like if a program is launching, there's a lot of operational things that need to get done before that, where you can put your time and your priority on that roadmap to show like, hey, the ops person or me, I'm going to be busy doing this during this time. So maybe other initiatives are going to have to wait or, get pushed or take a lower priority. And then even things working with like your platform vendors, if you know that they have something coming up, like downtime, for example, or they're releasing a new feature that you're going to be implementing in your community, that's also a really good place to put that in, because it's going to be taking up some of your time. It could affect your community members if you need to communicate that there's going to be certain downtimes during certain periods. And so I think the roadmap provides really good, not only team-wide visibility into what everybody's working on at any given time, and thus protects our bandwidth. You can even do like capacity planning with a roadmap, for example, but you can share that roadmap with your cross-functional stakeholders and across the organization as well. So they know what you're working on. They know how they can plug in if maybe there's some initiative, some possibility for cross collaboration or working together in some way. And you can also share it. I love maybe taking out some, private information, but also sharing some of this with our vendors so that they are aware of what our priorities are and what we are working on. See if there's any way that they can provide additional value. And then also making a version that's publicly available for the community as well. Obviously, you won't have, like platform migration, in the publicly facing roadmap, but you might have like the launch of like when they officially will move to the new platform, or when a certain event is happening. And the community members actually really value seeing that kind of visibility. So it provides a lot of just like really good transparency internally and externally.
Yeah. It sounds like it really gets everybody on the same page. In communities I've run in the past, we've did community calendars for each quarter. So you have like those main events, but also kind of tying together member events as well. And I know Tiffany at the top, you were saying it can be internal, well, company led events or member led events. And so it sounds like the through line tends to be is transparency when everyone's on the same page. It means that you can actually move towards the roadmap. Does that resonate?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, hit the nail on the head.
So, what are some best practices for collaboration with other teams? So, aside from the roadmap, you've identified, you've prioritized. I think we've all been in the position where, whether it's a small team or a really large organization, despite identifying, prioritizing, and creating a roadmap, you still kind of need to have those best practices for how to communicate and how to collaborate with teams. So, I'm wondering how in operations are you setting up those best practices, or how have you found yourself setting up those techniques or, rituals?
Um, I definitely didn't have any like frameworks or um, like mistake proof frameworks or something. But what I observed actually just working with some of the companies I worked with in the past, again, most of them are really small teams, is the culture of the business is really important. That is not only for community teams or community operations. I guess anyone who's working in any organization would tell that. But um, communication is really important for all the reasons that Tiffany just explained. Like you need,
Yeah.
and because your community teams are front facing, so you are interacting with the members most of the time. So you need to be communicating. You need to be the bridge between the product team or the sales team or whatever teams you have, and the customers or your members or your clients, um, because then you're going to be communicating the wish list, like the things that has been asked from the community, or maybe if you need to make an announcement, maybe you would know the best time or the best way to do it. Um, so when it comes to collaboration, I guess most of the um, like the most interlab um, overlap is happening between marketing, of course, because then marketing often is very busy with the communication side. Um, One example that I can give to make it more solidify, so that I'm not just talking buzzwords and technical terms, is um, again, maybe with the marketing, and then how you can add or how you can amplify your community members by collaborating with marketing teams, because then it would in the end it would benefit the it would be like a win-win situation. So
Yeah.
when you amplify the voices from the community in your marketing comms, it would give them, the members, something to be proud of. It would increase the belonging to the community, but then also it would probably increase the awareness and reach of your product or your business as well. So I think it is very important. It can be like a big collaboration part. Um, and when it comes to practices, it's just having like a common agenda and then a roadmap. All the things that Tiffany said that I don't even need to repeat.
Absolutely. And I love that example too with collaborating with marketing. I think that, like you said, they're so focused on messaging that externally most of the time that they're a really great partner. It sounds like in being able to synchronize messaging and to highlight members too. I think you have such a great point about how you can increase belonging in a way that is really a win-win for both the organization or business and then also for members in the community. Tiffany, do you have anything you want to add about best practices for collaboration?
Yeah, I think first of all, just like internal education enablement is really important. Community has been around for a very long time, but a lot of people still don't understand what it is or how it can help benefit them in their jobs. So I know a lot of the times working with, stakeholders, in support or even customer success, they're like, I'm too busy doing my job. Like I can't really do anything in community. And it's like, no, that's not actually how it works. Is community can help you do your job better,
Yeah.
and help support a lot of the functions in your role. And so I think first of all, just really explaining what community is and coming up with those shared goals. So I actually really like to do kind of like an annual or quarterly kickoff with key stakeholders across the company, doing things in terms of telling us again what their roadmap is or what our roadmap is, what we're focusing on, and how we can work together to either create a better customer experience, decrease support cases so that they can focus on higher priority cases, and better support people who maybe need a little bit more help than others. And then also really kind of focusing on the parts where we can improve each other's jobs and tasks and responsibilities, and show success across the organization in that way. I also think that being in each other's team meetings is something that I love to do. So having a representative from the community team sit in on someone else's team, that way they can hear what that team is working on and even ways that community can plug in, and vice versa, having other teams be able to sit in on ours so that they can kind of hear what our initiatives are and how they can plug in. And so I think that's something that's really helpful. I also love kind of doing a quarterly end of quarter like debrief or show and tell. So we invite everybody who we talk with, everybody who we're working with, we invite leadership. We pretty much do an open invitation of like, hey, we'd like to share what the community team worked on this quarter and have people attend. That way they can kind of see, oh, wow, like community is more than just, fun and events and things like that. We're actually providing a lot of really good value across the organization. This is how we've affected the product team. This is how we've affected the customer success team and even the marketing team and support. And that way it kind of keeps community front of mind, because at the end of the day, when you're working cross functionally, they have their own initiatives, they have their own jobs. It can get really easy to kind of forget about community sometimes unless you're in it every day. And so being able to keep constant communication, keep transparency, keep that alignment, really helps them to, rather than think of like community as an afterthought. Like let's say there's an event and then like we've all been there where it's like 1 month before the event and then the person reaches out to you and they're like, hey, so can we invite like our super users to this event? And you're like, why didn't you include us at the beginning?
Yeah.
Or they want a list of people or they want some sort of community thing and it's too far too late.
Yeah.
But if you set that precedent, have that constant communication, keep those lines open, you'll start getting contacted at the very beginning, which is a good feeling. And then you can work on it together as
Absolutely.
partners.
I love that goal of having community be a part of the whole process throughout.
One story that I can add, or example of how things might fail when you don't collaborate with the departments, is actually not only from community ops perspective, but overall. I think sometimes other teams might see you as the gate to the members,
Mhm.
um, which is actually not, because community teams are there to serve both the members and the business. So we're definitely not gatekeeping. Um, but yeah, they might be like, "Oh, why are you not sharing our new shiny announcement in the community?" And you're like, "But we've just talked about something else in the community, so it's not the time." Um, so it's really important to be transparent. And then I love Tiffany's idea of sitting in other departments' meetings so that you can have an understanding of what's going on within the business, so that if you need to act, you can act easier. One fail story that I have when there is no good enough communication happened that with too much people from the company communicated with the members. So
Mhm.
members or customers see the brand as one person or like one source of comms. So one time it happened that without communicating, the community team sent an email about events, and the sales team sent about like a campaign, and the product team sent an email about a new product release, etc. So that is something that you don't want to do to your users. But because we weren't communicating enough, then that caused lots of problems. So I think these kind of regular especially if you are going to be communicating with people, or if the action that you're going to take will going to affect the members, then I think it definitely need to. So maybe if anyone is thinking that, okay, I know that collaboration is important, but how can I explain this to my to others, to my team? Maybe give them this example. Look, we need to communicate, otherwise we're gonna make people mad.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that example too, because it's such a small thing that I think when teams aren't working every day on community, like Tiffany, you said, I believe, the example of, okay, well, I'm already doing my job. How is community important? I think kind of both of your examples are such a great way for anyone listening who maybe are struggling to communicate this to their teams to show, okay, community is already a part of your job. It's an add-on in the sense of it's a tool for you, it's a resource. And then on the other side, it's also a safeguard. So if we're all aligned and we know what we're sharing, then we're not overburdening members, or we're not sending competing messages, or, inviting them to multiple events or whatever it may be. Um, with all of that said, though, I think we have one question left. I feel like we could talk for hours about community operations, but of course, the classic kind of end note with all things community is, how do you show the impact? So, when you have your operations hat on for community, how are you measuring impact and the success of the initiatives that you're running, whether you're on a small team or a large team? So I'll let you both kind of jump in with your thoughts on impact and measuring success.
Sounds good. And I think this is probably the most underrated part of community operations, is really working on showing that value and that impact across the business. And I think that also, works very closely with the head of community, or the VP or whoever is running the community, to really make sure that you're able to show the impact across the company. So I think there's a couple things. Like, firstly, just again, goal alignment, shared goals across the company, right? So being able to figure out those win-win situations with your cross-functional stakeholders. And then just some examples. So for example, for support, case deflection is obviously the most talked about metric, in terms of how many cases how many cases are being deflected from support to community. And this can be in terms of, number of cases. It can even be from the customer side, in terms of time to a first response, or time to a resolution, or even CSAT score from getting support. You can look into marketing stats, like community members attending events, or how many people attend an event, then join the community, engage in the community, and then end up, converting to being a paid customer. To that point, that's also a community qualified lead, which is a shared goal that you can have with a sales team. Working with the product team, that's mainly focused on kind of like the ideas part of a community. You can look into, for example, like, okay, these are accounts, or existing customers that are submitting ideas or voting on ideas in the community. What is the total ARR for those accounts? And what is that propensity for retention and renewals based off of the ideas, and which ideas are being fulfilled from, the product team? And then lastly, looking at kind of like general customer success. There are correlations that you can show between community activity, i.e. like what customers are engaged in community, attending community events, how many people from that organization are in the community, and even things like NPS score and customer health score, and churn and renewals. So I think just like I know I threw a lot of buzzwords there just now, but there's really so much that you can show from community in terms of like how that touches every other team and how it impacts the team as well. And I think that's something that a lot of teams don't really have resources to help show. I think it's really difficult because community data is spread throughout everything. So we have our platform like Hivebrite, for example, but it does it talk with Salesforce to show the accounts and the sales? Does it work with marketing on whatever event tool they're using? Does it work with the, like the product board or the product prioritization tool? So it's kind of all over the place. And so I think one of the biggest challenges for community teams is being able to pull that relevant data from across the organization and then be able to show it in a meaningful manner. I mean, it's so easy to have dashboards and dashboards and dashboards, but being able to really show the like, so what, or like what is this telling us and what can we do going forward based off of this data. And so I think that's something that I'm really interested in kind of seeing how the industry progresses going forward to be able to really show that impact of community across the company.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna add, um, or I'm gonna add things from a perspective of really small teams and when you're just starting with your community building initiatives, because I mean these kind of things that Tiffany just mentioned definitely needed in the bigger organizations because then all of the stakeholders are asking these kind of things. But then some of some of these numbers might not relate if you're just starting out or if you don't have a sales team, for example, maybe you are one of the sales team. So that's like really hard to calculate or measure some of the things. So I might talk about a little bit of the not the quantitative but the qualitative measurements of. I think the biggest thing is talking to your members and again documenting as much as possible, and then documenting the transition that you touched on with the community initiatives. For example, a member is subscribed to the newsletter and then they've been clicked onto some links so they're interested or like engaged with your brand and then they've attended an event and then they met someone. So when you have a half an hour interview with a member, they're probably going to talk about, oh, I attended this event and then I met that person and then we started collaborating and then now you're using your product together, blah blah blah. So you can keep take these stories and then tell those stories to your stakeholders or your founders to show the impact of the community initiatives because that um, in user research they say that like it's enough that if you ask 5 people, so maybe if you show like 5 different stories, 5 different cases how the community efforts really worked in terms of maybe what's the word, converting someone to buy your product or buy your membership, it would be really important and it would be really valuable to the stakeholders. And then, well, I guess one tip is that whatever you do, just keep documenting, keep measuring as much as possible because people are going to ask, you're working on things, you're talking to all of these members, you're doing these events, but people are going to ask, is it working? And then you need to, at the end of the day, you need to show that it is working for the aligned or the shared goal, the business goal. So yeah, even if you don't have high numbers, don't worry, just tell the stories.
Absolutely. And I like that approach too of kind of reverse engineering the stories you are talking of when you are talking to members in the early stages of, let's say you are building a brand new community, hearing their stories and then doing that backtracking of, okay, I know we sent this newsletter out and they met at this event. Did they click the link? And being able to, I think Tiffany, kind of to the point you were making about showing the impact and actually showing the so what, that is a really great way of kind of getting to the so what, even if you don't have maybe all of the resources a larger community might have.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. I
yeah,
sorry, just really to
no,
add,
go ahead.
Ajay, I think that's an amazing point is the storytelling. I think when you're talking with cross-functional stakeholders and you're just throwing numbers at them, like sometimes their eyes are just going to glaze over. So it's really telling the stories of the community members who have gone through something or how, a community initiative impacted something later on, at the company. I think those types of stories and then tying in the numbers is really the most powerful way to do it. I think
Yeah.
storytelling is so important.
Especially because we all know that, I mean, probably everyone listening to this podcast as well knows that community is a very slow process. Community building is a very slow process. So founders are eager to get results really fast. So they'll start asking you, okay, is it working from day one? And you're like, well, it just started. Just give me some time. So it's not, yeah. So maybe it's also a little bit about earning yourself some time with the stories that you tell, that showing the impact.
Absolutely. And I think Tiffany, you were touching on that too, is like the story creates kind of that connection to the numbers. Because oftentimes I think what the most difficult part of measuring community is the human impact that we see as community builders. It's transformational, but then when you put a new you put a number to it, it might not feel the same. So if you're able to marry those two together, or kind of find a way to bring the story alongside the number, that I think kind of balances it out, for not only yourself in operations, but then also describes your community in a way that shows it's dynamic and building and growing still, to your point. Anything else we want to add about metrics? I feel like we could do a whole episode on just metrics and measuring impact when it comes to operations.
I think just really listening to the leadership at your company and figuring out what the company's priorities are and then aligning your community goals to that is at the end of the day what's the most important, because if the company's goal is retention, and you're focusing on like case deflection as the main point, it's not going to land very well. And so being able to really figure out what the company's goals are and aligning yourself to that, I think, is going to be really important. And then kind of thinking to Edge's point too, is the goals are really going to depend on the stage of your company, as well as the stage of your community, because at the end of the day, not every community is going to have an ideas portion of it, or your community might be focused on top of funnel activities and educating people who are interested in learning more about the company or the product or whatever it is. And so being able to be flexible with the goals, I think, is important. And then just being able to find ways to easily measure it. So if you have to go in and pull data into an Excel spreadsheet every week and manipulate all the data, that's not going to be sustainable or worth your time. So making sure that you set yourself up so that whatever you're looking to track, you're able to easily measure it. Whether that's just a dashboard that's automatically updated, or getting the data from a BI tool or an analytics tool. Because at the end of the day, if you're having to like push that data and like figure out a number right away, I think that's not going to set you up for success.
M-
Absolutely.
Maybe one kind of a practical project management thing that I can add, which I try to do in my day-to-day operations of my tasks. I can't say that I'm 100% succeeding following that, but I'll put it out there. If it works for anyone, I'll be happy. Um, so again, like Tiffany said, there will be different goals, um, and then there will be different goals or targets will be given to you. So that some of the goals might be educating your members, connecting them to each other, upselling or selling the product, increasing the revenue. Um, or what else can it be? Like retention, solving customer problems, etc. So maybe list those goals into buckets. And then whenever you're doing your whatever project management tool you're using, let's say you're using Asana or Trello, then you can, or the task, you can assign them to your goals. So at the end of the day, or at the end of the week, month anyway, when you're doing your reviews with your team, you can show that, okay, for these goals, we have done these tasks. For these goals, we've done these tasks, so that you can always make sure that you're on top of all of the aligned goals, and that you're not neglecting anything. Um, yeah, maybe that can be a case. And then you can ask, if someone asks you, one of your supervisors is asking you a new new shiny bright idea, then you can ask, okay, I have all of these on my plate. So would you like to shuffle and then the
Yeah.
prioritization so that I can maybe decrease the amount of efforts that I'm putting to any of these goals? Or is it really that important? Maybe because then this will help them to rethink of how important the new ideas as well.
Yeah. And it really sets those boundaries too, it sounds like, when you're able to say, all right, yes, we're measuring X, Y, Z. However, these are all of the tasks that it takes to, measure that, or these are all the processes we have to set in motion to get to that endpoint. And then being able to actually have that documented and show it sounds like it makes a world of a difference. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for recording